Corruption allegations in the judiciary. We are now hearing of talks of reforms yet again. What happened to the last reforms and how did we get here? And more importantly, where do we go from here? The hashtag is Checkpoint on Twitter at KTN Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara. You can also SMS us. The number is 22155. My panel, once again tonight on the show, Edwin Sifuna, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Apollo Mboya, who's the outgoing CEO of the LSK, and Elisha Ongoya. We're in good company tonight with our learned friends as we discuss the state of our judicial system in the country. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Elisha, I'd like to start with you. We've been down this road of reforms. We had the radical surgery. We've got the vetting process. That is still an ongoing process. And yet we find ourselves at this point with some damning allegations at the highest court, no less. How did we get here?
I think I understand the skepticism among Kenyans, particularly in light of these allegations. They are not encouraging at all. But I don't think as a generation we have the last word to write off the state of our society by suggesting that then this should be the last time we talk about reform. I'd like to see the optimistic perspective that our society is a going concern into eternity. And therefore, the talk about reform should not appear as if it has a timeline that once that time comes, we will never talk about reform again. Nevertheless, I understand the skepticism. It's suggestive about many socio, political, cultural aspects of we as a people. So that even when we change the legal instruments, the question is, have we changed our attitudes as a society at a critical mass to be able to ensure that if somebody picked an individual from our midst to serve in public office, there is a high probability that they are picking the right kind of that office? Or have we as a society conduced an atmosphere where we are so rotten that if you pick somebody from our midst, then chances are you are picking a rotten apple for this office? That's the challenge that I want our viewers out there, the public out there, to begin reflecting on, because it's not just enough to reflect on individuals. I think as a society we need to reflect on our structures, on our broader institutional ethos, so that at the end of the day, even as we continue talking about reform, chances are that sometime in our living history or beyond our living history, these reforms will land and deliver a product that is worth the pride of the people that we call Kenyans. An
indictment on society as a whole and not just on the allegations against a Supreme Court justice.
I think so, yes.
Apollo, yet we look at lawyers and say maybe there's hope, but it doesn't look like it. We've seen quite a few issues with the Law Society of Kenya itself in the last year or so.
Yes, I think for the Law Society, I say it's the vibrancy that we are witnessing in the Law Society of Kenya, and it's nothing to worry about so much, because it's a transition time, it's an election time also, and all the time whenever we have the election year, we see this. Right now,
surely we haven't seen it though to this level.
No, it's
where lawyers are shouting at each other, our learned friends whom we expect more from. So we're starting to doubt the whole judicial system as a whole.
Yeah, what I can say is that this time around, it's been reported more. Probably it was not being reported more. There's more scrutiny that's going on. There is more image that is coming on our TV, so we can see it.
So you've always been like that? Is that what you're saying? Things have always been like that with the
No, there is increased vibrancy. Let me use that term.
Increased vibrancy.
Yes.
Edwin, really, even with lawyers, because now the allegations that are coming up are that, even lawyers are party to this mess in the judiciary. So the question is, who will save us? The police service keeps coming up on the Corruption Perception Index as one of the most corrupt institutions. Lawyers are now in a quandary, and now the Judicial Service Commission. So, what's going on within the whole system?
I absolutely agree with my learned friend, Mr. Ongoya, that it is an indictment on the general society. And even we as a society of lawyers have not been spared, because the truth of the matter is that it is a well-known fact that even within the judiciary and within the legal system, within the legal fraternity, there are lawyers who are leading the way in subverting the, the judicial system itself. Because when we talk about corruption, we as lawyers must also look at ourselves and ask ourselves critically which part it is that we play. Because if we are the people who are representing litigants in court, it is highly unlikely that a litigant himself would attempt such a feat without involving their lawyer. In fact, it is a matter for which many lawyers would drop a brief that a client has gone round their back and tried to, resolve a matter outside of proper channels. And for me particularly, I am very, very concerned that we as a bar association have not been keen to root out those of our members that are notorious for trying to, win cases through means other than just the persuasion and the law and the facts of the particular cases, and that many of or some of our members are at the forefront in corrupting our judges and the judicial system in general.
I'd like you to address the issue a little bit about, lawyers and the Law Society. Apollo, sitting right next to you, says, well, you're just more vibrant and it's an election period and that's coming up, in the month of February. But then Kenyans are also concerned about the conduct of lawyers themselves, hence painting a bigger picture about just what's going on in the system.
Of course, Apollo would want to put it in rosy terms like vibrancy, because he's been smack in the middle of the problems that we've had at the Law Society of Kenya. And the truth of the matter is that the problems we've seen for the past 18 months at the LSK have been problems to do with integrity, so that even the leadership of a society, current leadership of a society, Mr. Apollo Mboya included, have no right whatsoever to question any other person's moral integrity or even, to speak on these issues of corruption, because he and together with the current leadership of the society were unable to explain to the membership very basic principles. For instance, I as a member had to seek a court order to see documents that ordinarily should be given to me as a matter of course, and that opaqueness and that mysterious dealings and all the darkness that surrounded one of their pet projects, which we luckily were able to get court orders to stop, is what makes people ask all these questions, because we want to live in a country that observes transparency and integrity. So the leadership of the society can call it what they want, but the truth of the matter is that it was an issue to do with transparency, it was an issue to do with integrity, and they failed the test, and they failed spectacularly.
Elisha,
yes.
Opaqueness, mysterious dealings, darkness within the LSK, sort of similar words we're hearing in the judiciary, the police no less. The question about reforms then, where do we begin to reform? We were reforming the judiciary, but now with the allegations then, we reformed the police service, still not much change there. Now it's within the lawyers. When we talk about reforms, should we be reformed?
Allow me to raise an issue of principle so that, again, we don't violate some of the most elementary tenets governing our participation in this nature. Number one, the question about whether or not the Law Society's current leadership or outgoing leadership has been opaque or not is a matter that is still actively under litigation in a court of law. And therefore, as an observer of the principle of the rule of law, I would be very reluctant to encourage detailed exposition of who is right and who is wrong on that debate.
But merely the allegations and the counter allegations.
Yes, let me come to it. Number one, I'm concerned, like another Kenyan, about the state of the legal profession in this country, which is a fundamental profession to one of the pillars of our whole society, the rule of law and the concept of justice. A society that is unjust, a society that does not observe the rule of law, is a recipe for failure in many respects. Economically, that society cannot grow. Socially, that society cannot grow. And that society is a hopeless society. People would be driven to despondency if they realize that they have no hope in the nature of justice, elementary fairness, if I may call it. So I am concerned that the profession to which I belong and to which I have contributed the much I have done this far would be stuck in the kind of controversy that we find ourselves in at the moment. But I want to emphasize the side of hope, that let our viewers, let the general public not give up on the language of reform. After all, the only way out of this cul-de-sac is a measure of reform, the right reform. The challenge is this, Yvonne, that if you introduce the language of reform, it can also be taken advantage of by coup makers, people who would come and use the language of reform to assume instruments of reform so as to stifle reform. And that calls upon reflection on our society. To ask, the people who we utilize for public office or for office of sufficient public character are people we have grown up with in a society. These are people we were born with in the same households. These are people we have gone to school with, people we have interacted with. If you talk about lawyers, for example, these are university graduates. We have schooled with them from kindergarten to primary school to high school to university. Right. We have observed them. We must ask ourselves as a people, how come in spite of this sufficient interaction with these people, when we are given an opportunity to elect those to hold and drive instruments that are sensitive to our destiny, we choose the worst among them, we choose the least effective among them.
And it's an interesting point that you talk about who we chose, because Apollo, when the Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, was coming in, he was the typical reformer. He is a man who went to jail for the ideals of democracy and was detained by the government before. He was a typical reformer, and then we hear him saying it's a bandit economy, and it's being run by bandits, and then we hear his assertions just this week about corruption therein. Was he the right man for the job, or did he just come in and find there's a whole cartel system and he was just unable to sort of infiltrate and break that up?
Okay, I think from my own estimation, Dr. Willie Mutunga has done a very good job. Given the circumstances and the environment under which he came in. Why am I saying this? The judiciary is the only arm of government that we have seen confronting every allegation. And I will contrast this. Now, right now, many people do not know, but there is a tribunal going on Justice Mutava Justice Mutava. Joseph Mutava is the only problem is that it is not public, because the rules provide that unless the judge demands that the matter be heard in public, it's going on. That's one thing. Secondly, we have seen instances where allegations have been given with regard to specific people in the judiciary, and actions have been taken. Okay? Now, let's come to the last one. This current one that we are talking about, allegations have also been given.
Yes, but to be fair, Apollo, the allegations were raised. The affidavit was signed quite some time back, and many people say that the Chief Justice only acted after a media house then brought these allegations to light.
I'm coming to that, but let's contrast this, because there was a question, was it the right person? Contrast it with what happened in National Assembly, where they invited the EACC to do an audit. Immediately the audit report was tabled, they went wild. They were actually wanted to impeach the speaker because of the report. Now, coming back to the judiciary, the steps that were taken, and I'm not privy to most of them, when this affidavit was lodged, and from the reports that we are getting, it took time, because the judiciary, through their internal processes, decided to corroborate what was contained in that affidavit. And that's the information that
but it's quite suspect, because the media did it, and then within less than 5 days, then he was putting that together. Edwin, you don't seem to agree.
No, first, to answer the question, was Willie Mutunga the right person?
Right.
I will go with the findings of a Public Accounts Committee on his tenure as Chief Justice of the Judiciary. And the Public Accounts Committee concluded that he was absolutely the worst possible choice we would have gone with.
Why?
For the judiciary, because he has failed to provide leadership on so many things, and you yourself spoke to the kind of hope that we had when he was appointed, so that if we have given you the instruments of power and control over an arm of government, you are not necessarily supposed to come back to us later crying about cartels, when we have put you in place. We have put you we have given you all the powers that you could possibly want for you to be able to undertake the reform that we've talked about. This is a Chief Justice who, even in the report by the PSC itself, has been accused of financial impropriety. He himself has been accused of drawing salary advances that were unprocedural and against the advice of Treasury. So that if you want to give an audit of his tenure as Chief Justice, he is one of the worst performing Chief Justices in this country.